This is like my favorite part of the movie when the montage happens and everything comes together. Here in New England, there's a brief amount of time in the summer when tomatoes are at their peak ripeness. And it's during that time I will eat tomatoes for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and maybe some snacks too. So today we're gonna make a tomato salad with steak tips and some crispy chickpeas, all topped with some herbs, a bunch of lettuce, and feta cheese. I'm gonna start with the steak tips. And here I have 1.5 pounds of sirloin steak tips. Depending on where you are in the country, steak tips are sold differently. I've seen it listed as steak tips, but I've also seen it listed as flat meat or even bavette. So they all mean the same thing. As you can see, there's a good amount of marbling in these steak tips, so that means it's going to be a tender cut of meat. And it also has a loose grain, so it's going to do well for things like marinating. If you can't find steak tips in your grocery store, you can substitute flank steak or skirt steak because they have a similar loose grain. You just might have to adjust the cooking time a little bit. So I just dried off the steak with some paper towels. I'm going to cut the steak tips into 3-inch pieces. And I didn't have to trim this one too much, but sometimes you may have to if you have a lot of, the extra fat right there. I prefer buying the flat meat or the steak tips as one whole piece as opposed to strips or already cut in cubes. And that's because that way I can control the size of the pieces. They'll be even in size, which means they will cook at the same rate. So again, I'm just cutting them into 3-inch pieces. All right, and I have a 1/2 teaspoon salt and a 1/4 teaspoon pepper that I'm just going to season the steak tips with. All right, I'm just gonna get washed up. So now heat up 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil over medium-high heat until just smoking. And I'm using a nonstick skillet. I'm gonna cook the steak tips until well browned all over, which will take about 8 to 10 minutes. And I'm going to be looking for an internal temperature of 120 to 125 degrees for medium rare. All right, so I'm going to transfer the steak tips to a carving board, and that is the hardest part of this recipe. It is a fresh salad. It is so bright. It's just one of my favorite things to make. All right, I'll tent it with some foil and put this over here. All right, we've got our juicy, tender steak, and we're gonna have also juicy, ripe tomatoes. So whenever I have a salad, I always have to have a crunchy component to it. So I made some crispy, spiced chickpeas earlier. I did it by emptying a couple cans of chickpeas into a colander. I let that sit for a bit. Then you're actually gonna put them in the microwave, and you wanna let them go for like 10 minutes. You wanna make sure to line the plate with some paper towels. It's just gonna help to absorb like any extra moisture that's hanging on to the chickpeas. Then I tossed them with some olive oil and I baked them for 30 minutes. Then I made one of my favorite spice blends, which is similar to curry powder. And you could use curry powder if you preferred that instead, but you also could do barbecue spices. You could do sort of like a Spanish paprika type of situation. Whatever you have in your cabinet and you like to use is perfect for this recipe. The hottest part of the pan is around the edges, so just put the chickpeas into the center so that they don't burn. And finally, I tossed the chickpeas with those spices and I let them sit just for a little bit, and now I can add them to my salad. Here they are. Listen, that's some crispiness. I'm gonna make the vinaigrette. So it's a really basic lemon vinaigrette, but it does have a shallot in it, just to give a little bit of extra sweetness and a little bit of extra flavor. And I'm gonna mince it. So I'm gonna start by taking off the paper and then halving it, so cutting it right down the center. Shallots I love to use in dressings because as opposed to an onion, which can kind of overpower everything, it just adds a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of that oniony flavor. It just suggests it. And then using your hand parallel to the board, you want to take your knife, which is also parallel to the board, and run it through. I'm going to change my grip there. And then you can kind of use the striations, like the lines of the shallot, as your guide when mincing. So you want a sharp knife, let the knife do the work for you. And then turn it the other way, and then slice. Okay, now I'm going to transfer them to a good sized bowl because that's where the dressing and the lettuce and everything's going to get tossed together. And in the summertime, when you've got herbs growing or you have neighbors' herbs growing, you can add all sorts of stuff to this salad. You could add a bunch of different herbs. Today we're going to add basil, but you could add chives, scallions, parsley. It's definitely a peak of summer type of dish. All right. And I need 1 teaspoon of lemon juice. So I'm going to save this for some cocktails later. And just using my fingers, I'm just going to put them tightly together just to catch any seeds. I need some salt and pepper, about a ½ teaspoon salt, and a ¼ teaspoon of pepper. I'm going to add a few tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. I'm just whisking the oil in nice and slowly. It's going to help just to keep the dressing together and emulsify. Okay, I'm going to tear some basil. And again, you could use chives here, parsley, you could use arugula, kind of choose your own adventure with this type of recipe. Whatever's bright, whatever's fresh, and whatever is growing in your garden, put it here. I'm just going to tear the basil rustically. It's my way of not doing things perfectly. It smells like summer. Oh, I love the smell of basil. So if I go to the farmer's market or the store, I try to stock up as much as I can because again, I'm going to eat them breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so I need a good amount. But this recipe uses 1.5 pounds, and they're really ripe. And you know a tomato is ripe when you can just press ever so slightly with your thumb and you just see a little bit of an indent. So I'm going to slice these 1/4 inch thick. My Nana always grew her tomatoes every summer, and it was like this flourishing garden, and for some reason I am not as good as she was as growing tomatoes. So last year I had maybe 3 that were like really looking good, and I was getting out of the car and my oldest son was just walking around in the yard, and I turned around for 2 seconds and then I look and he's over like going through the chicken wire of the raised bed. He was eating one of the tomatoes like an apple. And I couldn't get mad because it's adorable and it's good that he's eating tomatoes. In fact, my kids call tomatoes tomatoes, and they love their tomatoes. So for the salad, I'm not going to go in and core the tomatoes unless it does have one of that, a big fibrous section of it. But I'll just kind of use the tip of my knife and cut it out that way. And then what I'm also going to do, just to make sure I'm not wasting any of these tomatoes, I will go right around the core with my knife, kind of put it on an angle, 45-degree angle, and slice just around the core. So there you go. You'll only have just that little bit left. Okay, I need to tidy some things up, but then we're going to arrange our salad. This guy comes out for this salad especially because it's really nice and big. It looks so beautiful. So when I'm arranging this salad in particular and these tomatoes, since some of them are a little rustic, I will kind of put those underneath where the greens are going to go. And there is no rhyme or reason for how to do this. Just kind of put them in a single layer because these tomatoes are just so beautiful. They shine on their own. Yum. All right. Okay, I'm going to drizzle this layer first with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. So you know you're a cook when you have a few different types of salt in your kitchen. And for a while, I would keep this flaky sea salt out with the regular kosher salt and pepper until I saw how quickly it was being used. And so I hide mine in the cabinet now so my husband or my kids can't use it. But I'm gonna use it for something like this because it's great for finishing any kind of salad or tomatoes like this. And a little goes a long way, so you don't need too much. And there's something great about the texture of it because it's coarse and it's not overpoweringly salty. It's just kind of adds a really good texture. And then I'm going to sprinkle with a little bit of pepper. I honestly could stop here. However, I have a few other things waiting to go on the salad. So I've got 5 ounces of gem lettuce. You could use whatever kind of lettuce you want really here. Arugula, green leaf, red leaf, you do you. I'm gonna toss it with the dressing. But there's something great about gem lettuce too because it's small enough for bite-sized-ish pieces, but it also is a perfect bed to hold the steak and the cheese and the basil and those chickpeas. All right, using the tongs, I'm gonna use them to help put the lettuce sort of into the center, but sprawling out a little bit because I wanna show that there are those gorgeous tomatoes on the bottom. All right, now pour the rest of the vinaigrette all over. And this is a composed salad, so it's important to see every element. You're not just tossing everything in a bowl. So I'm taking the time to do each layer. Now I've got the basil. Again, sprinkle throughout. And there's nothing better than tomatoes with basil, so be sure to get some basil on top of those at the bottom. All right, I'm gonna put that aside because now it's time to slice up our steak tips. Oh yeah. Again, those have been resting for a little while. Now, when you're slicing steak tips, it's really important to slice against the grain. And you can find out which way the grain is running just by holding up, and you can see lines going this way. So that's the grain. And when you're slicing against the grain, you're slicing this way. And if you don't cut it that way, it's gonna be chewy. And you wanna slice them about 1/4 of an inch thick. Beautifully medium rare. I mentioned that I like to buy the steak whole. And as you can see, it's a good thing I did because they cooked evenly and all at the same rate. And the good thing about this salad is that you can serve it with the steak warm. You can serve it with the steak room temperature. All right, so like everything else, put the steak throughout the salad. And we eat with our eyes, we really do. So this step, you really kind of wanna take a little extra time just to make sure it looks pretty. This may feel like a lot of steak, but it serves 4 to 6 people. So once you start portioning it out, it's perfect. Yum, yum, yum. I'm gonna top this with a couple ounces of feta cheese. I bought it in the whole block form, and then that way I'm gonna crumble it myself. Feta is great for this recipe, but you could also use blue cheese or gorgonzola or goat cheese, but I love the way the tanginess of the feta cuts through the richness of the steak. I love feta. I love you, feta. All right, now, finally, our crispy chickpeas from earlier. You need about 1/2 cup, so that's like a good handful. I'm gonna save those for later. Again, they're great car snacks, any kind of snack. And just sprinkle them sort of as your finishing touch on top. Yum. All right, I'm gonna clean up, and then I'm gonna taste this salad. Come to mama. I'm going to the bottom. I'm grabbing all the layers at once. Oh boy. All right, now I'll just take this. Just joking. Just joking. All right, I'm gonna get every bit. This is so delicious. Really nice crust on the exterior, but really tender on the interior. Bring it together with all the feta cheese, that really balanced lemon shallot vinaigrette, and the crunch factor from our spiced chickpeas. This is excellent. Tomato salad with steak tips. The link for this recipe is in the description of this video, and let me know in the comments your favorite way to enjoy those perfect summertime tomatoes. Thanks for watching.